My hands still tremor on the steering wheel. It's a blur. Packing bags I barely remember buying, checking out of the hotel like I'm on autopilot, the curt words at the airport. Now, we sit here, separate rows, a gulf between us wider than this damn ocean. I'd thought this was paradise, now it feels like my grave. She's staring out the window, tears streak her face. What's going through her head? Regret? Shame? I don't even know this woman anymore. The woman I married, swore vows to, loved with everything I had, she's a ghost beside me. I ache to scream, to smash something, to feel anything but this chilling numbness. But I just sit, jaw clenched, white-knuckled on the armrest. A week ago, I'd have comforted her, tried to understand. Now, I want her to suffer as I am. Every time she sniffles, part of me dies, another part hardens. It's not going to be that easy, sweetheart. Betrayal doesn't get washed away with convenient tears. The plane touches down, home feels like a war zone. She tries to touch my hand as we leave. I recoil, eyes blazing. Don't you dare, I say through gritted teeth. My brother, Mike, is waiting. Bless him, always got my back. The fury in his eyes is my own, amplified. He offers her a curt nod, nothing more. On the car ride, it's silent. But between Mike and me, there's this unspoken electricity. He knows I'm not okay, won't pretend I am. Knows I want revenge, almost as much as I want answers. We reach my place. It's not ours anymore. I unlock the door, she stands there, a lost puppy. My stuff. She whispers, a pathetic little sound. I'll get it boxed up, I say coldly. Not tonight though, I can't deal with this right now. I shove past her, head into the bedroom, slam the door. I sit staring at the bed we shared. The damn comforter was her choice, that stupid floral pattern. I start to rip it off when the phone rings. It's Sarah, her best friend, the voice of reason that's always been missing in my wife's life. Hey, I say, voice rough. I don't even ask how she knew I was back. Gossip spreads fast in this town. Look, I saw her today at the store, Sarah begins. She's a mess, you know, not an excuse, but what, Sarah? I interrupt, but she loves me, but this was a mistake? The bitterness spills out of me. No, there's a sharp edge to Sarah's tone. But she's your wife, you built a life with her. Don't you at least owe her the chance to explain? Sarah's words sting. I try to fight it, but a tiny flicker of doubt eats at me. I spent months building a fortress of righteous anger, now, there's a crack. Fine, I'll hear her out. But make no mistake, Sarah, forgiveness isn't on the menu. Send her over, I growl. I can't bear to say her name anymore. Sarah's hesitant, you sure? Maybe a neutral place? A coffee shop or something? No, I cut her off, here. This was our home. If she wants to talk, she needs to face what she shattered. 40 agonizing minutes later, a knock echoes through the house, each thump another blow to my sanity. I yank open the door and there she stands. It's like looking at a stranger. This is not the vibrant woman from the honeymoon photos, but a pale, trembling version, diminished by her own shame. You wanted to talk? I'm all business, the hurt locked down tight. She swallows hard, her voice raspy. I don't even know where to start. Well, how about at the beginning, I snap. The moment you decided sneaking around was a great life choice. A tear rolls down her cheek, but I refuse to soften. She can't cry her way out of this one. The details of the affair spill out the flattering attention, the way that yoga instructor made her feel desired after the wedding madness was over. It all sounds pathetically cliché, but damn if hearing her say the words doesn't twist like a knife in my gut. I wasn't thinking, she whispers. I know that's not an excuse, but it was like a fog came over me. I never meant to hurt you. The words hang between us, heavy and useless. I scoff, convenient fog, I toss back at her. The talk grinds on, a storm of half-formed accusations and stifled apologies. Every word exchanged further poisons the space between us. The apartment feels suffocating, filled with the ghost of our promises. By the time we finally fall silent, we're just hollowed-out shells of the people we used to be. I don't know any more than I did when she arrived. There's no easy explanation, no magical, fix-it, button. In the end, I don't tell her to leave, don't tell her to stay. She sleeps on the couch, a grotesque echo of happier times. I lock myself in the bedroom, drowning in the nauseating scent of betrayal that lingers on the damned floral bedspread. I stare at the ceiling, imagining flames consuming this pathetic scene. The bed, the apartment, all of it. This isn't a resolution, just another layer of hell. Mornings have always been my thing, but not this one. I wake with the weight of the world crushing my chest. No sunlight cuts through the despair blanketing the room. She stirs on the couch, avoiding my eyes. We're more ghosts now than husband and wife. I grab coffee, check my phone mindlessly. Then it hits, Mike's text. It's one word. School. Then another. Today. Dread coils in my stomach. See, my job isn't just about kids and history lessons anymore. It's a landmine. Her niece is in my class. God, the irony is brutal. Getting ready feels like walking through mud. I iron my shirt twice for no damn reason, stalling. There's no playbook for this. No teacher training about how to face the aunt of your cheating wife. School becomes a surreal nightmare. It's a small town. Rumors fly fast. Students whisper behind their hands. Colleagues offer those pitying glances that make you want to hurl. The kid, Annie, she's quiet. Head down, doing her work. But those eyes, they've seen too much. During a break, I snag another teacher. Hey, Emily, I try to sound casual, you heard anything? You know, about Annie's family? Emily, usually sharp as a tack, turns vague. Oh, stuff happens. Families, they go through things. That's all the confirmation I need. Every damn corner of my life is now contaminated. Class with Annie is pure torture on repeat. I try to focus on Napoleon or something, but those eyes bore into me. She knows. How couldn't she? Am I the villain in her story now? The guy who threw away her aunt? At the bell, she lingers. Mr. Davis, my name feels alien, can I talk to you? Here it comes. I brace myself for tears, accusations, God knows what. Instead, the kid just stares at me. I wait for her to lash out, but then she says, quiet but steady, she loves you. And just like that, with one damn sentence, she walks out. The rest of the day is a blur. I get through the motions because what else is there? At home, the apartment is a tomb, silence thick enough to suffocate. Her things are piled in boxes, like evidence in a crime scene. We circle each other, wary but trapped animals. Finally, she speaks. It's not an apology, not yet anyway. It's a question, cracked and desperate. Are we done? And damn it, I don't know the answer. The lawyer's office is a sterile box. Every tick of the clock sounds like a countdown to the end. I rub my temples, a headache pounding behind my eyes. Paperwork shuffles. It's official. Divorce. The word is an anvil dropped on my chest. My lawyer, slick and professional, throws the worst kind of pity my way. You'll be fine, he chirps, handing me a pen, sign here, and we can wrap this up. Fine, like I'll ever be fine again? I scribble my name. Outside, the world's in Technicolor, a cruel joke after that soul-crushing room. I should feel something, relieved, vindicated, even a little victorious. Instead, I'm just empty. Was this it? Our whole marriage reduced to scribbled signatures on a legal form? I wander, autopilot taking over. End up in the park where we used to picnic on Sundays. Kids laugh, their joy a needle to my balloon of misery. I sink down on a bench, staring blankly at the damn ducks in the pond. Rough day? A voice intrudes. It's a woman, maybe my age. Dark hair, big eyes that radiate a weary kind of empathy. Didn't think I could feel more pathetic, but here we are. You could say that. I manage, my voice rough. She sits, leaving a respectful space, but her presence is comforting somehow. Freshly divorced club, she says with a wry half-smile. Meetings are held randomly, in depressing locations. Before I can stop myself, the words come tumbling out. The betrayal, the hurt, the suffocating apartment, the shame radiating off me like heat. She doesn't interrupt. Just listens, nods. When I finally choke back on the rawness, she simply says, betrayal, it cuts deeper than anything, doesn't it? It's like she cracked open my skull and saw the carnage. You know how it feels? I ask, desperate for a connection that isn't judgmental or pitying. Yeah, her voice is soft, I spent months feeling like a ghost. You will too, for a while. And something twists, not hope, not really, but a flicker in the void. After what feels like a lifetime, I gather my shattered bits. Thanks, I mumble, then stand, I should go. Wait, she speaks quickly, I'm Sarah. You're a jolt, Ben, I reply, her, ex-husband. That Sarah, my wife's meddling best friend, the one stirring up drama, is the woman who understands my pain right now. That's some cosmic level irony right there. But as I walk off, it's not just the divorce weighing on me. There's a whole new set of questions, ones without easy answers, clawing their way to the surface. The apartment's a ticking time bomb, her presence everywhere, from the shampoo in the shower to the empty side of the bed. It's making me lose my damn mind. I grab a trash bag and start a rampage. Clothes I bought her, jewelry I never should've, stupid cutesy crap from those early days when I was an idiot in love, all of it goes in the bag. Donate it to a women's shelter? Sure, let some other woman wear the remnants of my bad choices. I slam the bag shut, ignoring the tears pricking my eyes. There, one symbolic victory in this whole damn mess. Phone buzzes, it's Mike, the only one who gets a free pass into my fortress of fury. I hit answer, yo, I'm downstairs, beer run, wanna join? It's pathetic, but the idea of drowning my sorrows in something other than self-pity is strangely appealing. We end up at some dive bar, the kind of place we joke about back when the world made sense. 2 beers turns into 5, Mike matches me shot for shot. The thing is, Mike's good for rage, not for talking about feelings, wouldn't know what to do with those. But tonight, he doesn't push. Just pours me a fresh one, lets me rant. It ain't pretty. He gets the full brunt of my betrayal complex, the humiliation, the rage, the sleepless nights. He just nods, grunts in the right places. That yoga dude, I slur, the words blurring, you think she, you know. Mike shrugs, maybe, maybe not. But screw that dude anyway. She'd shows him, whoever the hell he is. By closing time, I'm numb, not drunk, just hollowed out. Mike throws me in a cab, pats my shoulder. One day at a time, brother, he says, and even those cheesy words feel good coming from him. Home is still a battlefield, but the trash bag with her stuff is oddly comforting. I collapse on the couch, expecting nightmares. Instead, I black out. It isn't peaceful, but damn, it's sleep. Next morning, I'm hungover, head pounding in time with the construction racket coming from next door. Of course, as if this hell wasn't enough, now there's power tools. I force down coffee, drag myself to work. It's a disaster. Emails pile high, students give me wide berths, my lesson plans are, well, they don't exist. By lunchtime, my principal corners me. Concerned face, gentle tone, all the crap they teach those management types. Ben, I get you're going through stuff, but it's affecting the kids. Maybe a few days leave. His voice trails off, the unspoken, or get your act together, hangs in the air. That's the kick in the gut I need. I might be broken, but I ain't gonna lose my job over her stupidity. Work becomes a war zone. I dodge through the hallways, a man on a mission to prove something, but I'm not quite sure what. Lesson plans suddenly materialize, emails get answered with vicious efficiency. The kids are caught off guard by this new, hyper-focused Mr. Davis. Annie, especially, watches me with wide eyes. After school, I'm running on overdrive. Don't go home, don't give those demons a second to catch up. I hit the gym with a vengeance, punching the bag until my knuckles are raw. Then running, treadmill cranked up, the mantra becomes, push, push, just keep pushing. Days bleed into a blur. Work, sweat, collapse. It's survival mode, not exactly healthy, but it beats sinking into self-pity. One night, I finally crawl back to the apartment so late that even the construction has stopped. The place hits me like a ghost town. Then, in the kitchen, on top of the empty fridge, sits a Tupperware container. Confusion, fear, and something oddly close to hope tangle inside me. I cautiously open it. Inside, it's filled with lasagna? And a note, Sarah's messy scrawl. Figured you could use carbs. Something cracks. I sit at the kitchen table, the apartment silent as a tomb, and devour the damn lasagna. It's good, homemade, the way my mom used to make it. And with that simple act of kindness, Sarah's shifted. She's no longer just the informant, or the meddling friend. She's in this weird gray zone I don't know how to navigate. My phone buzzes. A text from work. A parent meeting needs rescheduling, Annie's parents. My gut twists. That's when I make a decision, reckless, impulsive, but mine. I text back, not my principal, but the parents directly. Let's meet tomorrow morning. Cafeteria, before school. It's a gamble. Hell, half of me wants to punch the dad, and probably the mom too, for raising a daughter capable of this. But the other half? That half needs answers, or else I'll drown in the blame game. The rest of the night is another crap insomniac special. By the time my alarm blares, I'm strung out, exhausted, and more determined than I've felt in weeks. It's time to stop being the victim in my own damn story. The morning air's got a bite to it, matching the ice in my veins as I walk towards the cafeteria. Annie's parents are waiting. Mom looks nervous, twisting her fingers. Dad's got that bulldog jawline, all tensed up and ready to fight for his daughter. We don't bother with pleasantries. I slide into the booth across from them, shove my coffee aside. We all know why we're here, I say, my voice rough, so let's cut the crap, shall we? Mom flinches, but Dad meets my gaze head on. You're damn right about that, he grunts, you tell me. What the hell happened with my little girl? For a split second, I want to lay it all out, the pain, the shame. Make them feel a fraction of my fury. Instead, I take a breath, forcing my voice to stay even. You want answers? Fine. What was going through her head when she decided to cheat? I slam my fist down on the table, rattling the plastic coffee cups. Mom gasps, the tears start flowing. Dad's face goes stony, she didn't decide, his voice is dangerously calm, she made a mistake. One damn stupid mistake. The rage explodes inside me, hot and bitter. Mistake? I almost choke on the word, she didn't trip and fall into an affair. You think I don't know how hard it is to raise kids, right? But don't you dare downplay this. We're locked in a stalemate, their hurt and defensiveness crashing into my white-hot anger. Then, Annie's mom speaks, her voice small, we're so sorry. She's messed up bad, knows it. And that's when it hits me. They're hurting too, not as much as me, not the same way, but they're caught in this mess with no easy way out. The tension bleeds out of the room, replaced by an uneasy, exhausted kind of understanding. The rest of the conversation's a blur. They apologize, I mumble something about it not being enough. We talk about Annie, how she's doing. Turns out, she's miserable, guilt gnawing at her, just like it is at me. We don't make any promises, don't magically become friends. But the ice has been broken. I leave the cafeteria feeling drained, not vindicated. Seeing their pain doesn't lessen mine. But it adds layers, a twist in the story. Maybe they didn't raise a monster, maybe she became one with a little help from me. The thought circles in my head like a vulture as I walk towards my car, ready to face the next battlefield. My classroom, my students, and the ghost of my marriage that lingers in the eyes of a scared little girl. Class with Annie's the most awkward hour of my life. Words gotten around after the parent meeting, I can feel the shift. Whispers, curious glances, the whole damn town playing a guessing game with my misery. Annie avoids my eyes, her usual chatter silenced. I teach on autopilot, the historical figures blurring into one giant betrayal. At the bell, instead of fleeing, Annie lingers at my desk. Mr. Davis? Her voice is shaky, Mom told me about. The meeting. I'm so sorry. I want to scream at her, demand explanations. But looking at her, a kid carrying the weight of her parents' screw-up, the anger dissolves, replaced by a weariness deeper than my own. I know, Annie, I managed to say. It's as much as either of us can handle in this damn hallway. The rest of the day is a write-off. After school, I ditch the gym, don't have the energy left for fake aggression. Instead, I find myself driving to Mom's place. It's old habit more than anything else, seeking comfort in the familiar. She takes one look at me and her eyes go soft. No words exchanged, just leads me to the kitchen table and pours a cup of tea. You look like hell, she says, blunt as always. Yeah, well, guess it runs in the family right now. I force out a bitter laugh. Mom sighs, pats my hand clumsily. She made a terrible mistake, Ben. But that doesn't erase all the good years, does it? The words hit an unexpected nerve. Maybe, I say slowly, maybe that's the worst part. All those good years, did they even matter if she could throw them away so easily? It's not a question for Mom, it's for the void gnawing at me. She doesn't offer some cheesy answer. Instead, she pours me another cup of tea, and we sit in silence, the kind that can only exist between people who've seen each other at their worst. It ain't fixing me, but it helps. That night, the phone buzzes late. It's a text from her. Simple, direct. Coffee? Tomorrow? 10 a.m., that place by the park? My heart does a stupid little leap. Fear, hope, and a hell of a lot of unresolved rage collide inside me. For what feels like an eternity, I stare at those words on the screen. Do I ignore it, let her dangle? Do I unleash all my fury in a text? Instead, I type back the shortest reply of my life. Okay. My finger hovers over send. Part of me knows I need answers, even if they hurt. The other part. That part still craves the woman I knew, the ghost who haunts my empty apartment. I hit send and shove the phone under my pillow. Sleep won't find. The coffee machine gurgled and sputtered, breaking the silence of the office kitchen. I poured myself a cup, the bitter scent mixing with the lingering smell of bleach. Typical Monday. A flicker of movement caught my eye. It was him, my secret, my lover. He was talking to her, his wife, my colleague. They smiled, unaware of the bomb ticking away beneath the surface of their pleasantries. He glanced over, saw me, and his eyes shifted briefly. Was that guilt, or just a flicker of nervousness? My stomach churned, and I turned away to hide the flush on my face. It had been weeks since we first kissed, the thrill of it all like a jolt of electricity. At first, it was just playful flirting, light-hearted comments thrown across the office. Then came stolen moments behind the stockroom door, quick and intense. He was all I could think about. Hey, you okay? He appeared beside me, his voice low. He reached out, and I could see her staring at us from the corner of my eye. Yeah, fine. Tired, that's all. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to swallow back the nervous lump in my throat. Rough night? He smirked. I knew what he was implying, and the heat rushed to my face again. Don't, I hissed. Not here. He retreated, a small quirk of his lips the only sign that my rebuke had hit its mark. For a moment, the thrill of the deception was back, like a forbidden secret only we shared. But then it was replaced by a dull ache of guilt. My husband, my kids. They swirled in my head, a stark contrast to the clandestine moments we snatched when no one was looking. This couldn't go on. I'd tell him, tonight. It has to stop. The weekend had been a blur of avoidance and secret, heated texts. I couldn't sleep, barely ate, jumpy at every little sound. My husband must have thought I was losing my mind. The lies felt like barbed wire wound around my throat, choking me. He'd be surprised, sure. Maybe angry or hurt, but then maybe he'd understand the way I hadn't, the way my life had felt stagnant, predictable, the way this other man had awakened something I didn't even know was gone. It was a desperate hope, a flimsy justification, but all I had to cling to. My heart pounded with every step towards home, a nervous energy humming in my veins. He'd know. My husband, with those kind eyes and the soft spot he always had for me, he'd look at me and just know that I'd been with another man. This wasn't a clumsy secret, it was a stain on my soul, one he didn't deserve. I hated myself in that moment. Each ring of the doorbell was like a drumbeat of doom. I almost couldn't bring myself to open the door, wanting to evaporate, to never face the inevitable storm. But I did. My husband's tired eyes met mine, and guilt washed over me like a tidal wave. The words tumbled out, clumsy and desperate. I confessed everything. The office glances, the stolen kisses, the lies I'd told while he slept beside me. I braced myself for his fury, his shattered heart. The silence stretched between us, suffocating. There was a flicker of disbelief in his eyes, then a deep, wounded look that cut me to the core. Why? He whispered, his voice breaking. Why did you do this? I had no answer. No excuses could justify this, no clever words could soften the blow. His tears weren't angry, just profoundly sad, and they stung more than any slap. He was shattered, and it was all my fault. He didn't leave, though. Didn't pack his bags, didn't scream or swear. I love you, he said, his voice thick with a pain I'd caused. More than you can imagine. Let's just try, okay? Try to fix this. And that's how the real lie started. The smiles I plastered over the hollowness inside, the dinners where every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. He tried, God knows he tried. But every time he looked at me, I saw that flicker of pain in his eyes, the knowledge of my betrayal etched into his features. It poisoned everything, a constant reminder of my selfishness and the wreckage I'd left behind. And him, my lover, he became bolder as my guilt deepened, a silent threat woven into our stolen moments in parking garages and hushed phone calls in empty bathrooms. I couldn't stop, but I couldn't stay either. I was drowning in a sea of my own making, torn between a man who loved me unconditionally and one who stoked a fire I didn't know how to extinguish. Every smile I gave my husband felt like a fraud. We were playing house, pretending everything was okay while I counted the hours until I could see him again, my lover. Sleeping in the same bed as my husband became torture, his body next to mine a constant reminder of the love I had fractured. One night, it all came spilling out again. We'd had a decent day, laughed with the kids, watched some mindless TV, almost normal. But as my husband's breathing slowed beside me, I couldn't stop the tears, the guilt crushing me all over again. I haven't stopped, I choked out the confession, my voice thick with sobs. I still see him. This time, it wasn't just sadness in my husband's eyes. There was a flash of anger, a spark of resentment burning beneath the hurt. The silence this time was tense, not sorrowful. You need to stop this, he said, his voice cold. For us, for the kids, it's not fair to anyone. And there it was, the first ultimatum. An icy dread settled in my stomach. But when I saw my lover the next day, everything melted away. His touch, the way he looked at me, it was wrong, but it was the only thing that felt real anymore. He promised, again, that he'd leave his wife, that we'd figure things out. His promises were like a drug, giving me false hope, pushing back the reality I couldn't face. I told my wife, he said one stolen afternoon, about us. Told her I want a divorce. My heart pounded with anticipation, fear mingling with excitement. This was it. I was both terrified and overjoyed. All the lies, the guilt, the whispered phone calls, they were finally going to lead to something, a new life with him. What did she say? I asked, breathlessly. He paused, and his eyes didn't quite meet mine. She's upset, he said, but she knows it's for the best, that it's been over for a while anyway. A small voice inside of me, the one I'd been desperately silencing, whispered a warning, something felt off. But hope has a way of smothering reason. I believed him, I wanted to believe him, he was going to be mine. Weeks became months, a blurry spiral of stolen glances and whispered promises from my lover. He'd leave his wife, he swore, but always with an excuse. First there was work, then his kids, then vague family problems. Something was always keeping him from following through, and the excuses felt increasingly empty. The hope I'd clung to was fading, replaced by a dull ache of dread. At the office, I couldn't look at his wife anymore. The pity I'd once felt turned into resentment, then into disgust at myself for being a part of this charade. One evening, I went to his house. His wife wasn't home, some work function or another. The house was immaculate, nothing out of place. No sign this was the messy, crumbling home of a collapsing marriage he'd been painting for me. He was caught off guard, shocked to see me there. What are you doing here? You can't just show up. Why are you lying to me? My voice came out low and dangerous. For months, you said you were leaving her. What is this? He started sputtering, coming up with the same lame excuses he always did. That's when it hit me, a wave of bitter realization. He was using me. The affair was an escape, a thrill. He never actually intended to leave his comfortable life. I was the fool, blinded by my desperation and unhappiness. You're never going to leave her, are you? I said quietly, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. Leaving him that day felt like walking out of a nightmare. The air tasted cleaner, I could breathe again. But it was mixed with a deep, painful humiliation. I'd been played, but more than anything, I was furious at myself. When I got home, my husband was there, watching some stupid sports show. He looked up and smiled, and in that moment, all the reasons came rushing back. This was the man who still loved me despite everything, who looked after me and our children. I was the one who had thrown that away. I'm leaving you, I said. It sounded raw, even to my own ears. He was stunned. What? Why? I couldn't tell him the truth, not all of it. It's not working for me anymore. I'm not happy. The look in his eyes was a mix of confusion and deep pain. He didn't deserve this, any of it, but I couldn't keep living a lie. This wasn't about my lover anymore. It was about me, finally taking a step for myself, even if it meant breaking something else in the process. Packing my life was surreal, a mix of relief and a hollow kind of terror. My husband didn't try to stop me, just looked at me with that wounded sadness that had become his constant expression. The kids were a blur of confusion and tears as I said goodbye, promising to see them as much as possible. His apartment, when I finally got there, smelled of him, sharp and a little stale. It wasn't the homey warmth I'd built over the years, but I tried. Set out photos of my kids on the nightstand, made his favorite meal that evening. We were starting over, building a new life. Or so I told myself. The first few weeks were bliss. It was like being back at the beginning, all those thrilling moments of sneaking around, the rush of doing something forbidden. We went out a lot, showed off our new relationship like a trophy. He was charming, attentive, everything my husband hadn't been in years. But then, reality started to sink in. When the excitement dwindled, the same problems resurfaced. Turns out, moving in together didn't fix them, it just magnified them tenfold. He was messy, leaving clothes and takeout containers everywhere. He seemed strangely hesitant about the divorce, still dragging his feet. And the worst part? Seeing his wife every day at work, that same forced politeness, it was unbearable. A constant reminder of the wreckage we'd created. "Can you please just finalize it?" I'd snap at him. "It's been months." He'd always deflect, making excuses about lawyers or complicated paperwork. I started getting paranoid. What if he wasn't leaving her at all? What if this, like everything else, was a lie? "Do you even love me?" I asked one night, fueled by wine and frustration. He paused, looked at me with that same expression he used to give when I caught him staring at other women. "Of course I do," he said, but it wasn't convincing. That's when I knew, with a sickening clarity, I realized he'd never really loved me. I was a distraction, a way out of his own miserable marriage. But now he was tired of the trouble, of the consequences. I was just the next problem in his life, and it was only a matter of time before he found a way out of that, too. Living with him turned into a daily battle. I'd explode into tearful arguments, fueled by despair and resentment. He'd shut down, withdraw into himself like a sulky child. The apartment we shared grew small, suffocating. The only escape was work, but even that was torture. Seeing his wife, the forced pleasantries, knowing what we had done, it was eating me alive. My friends, the few I hadn't driven away with my lies and secrecy, were distant. I'd shut them out, too ashamed to tell them the truth about why my marriage had ended. My parents were furious, their disappointment echoing in the silence on the other end of the phone. I was alone, adrift in a sea of my own disastrous choices. One morning, I couldn't get out of bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, a strange numbness washing over me. Why bother? What was the point? The questions were a dark tide, pulling me under. I stopped eating, barely slept, just a hollow shell going through the motions of a life I no longer recognized as mine. "You need help," he said one night, after finding me crumpled on the kitchen floor, crying. There was concern in his voice, but also a trace of irritation, like I was an inconvenience. He was right. I knew it deep down. The next morning, it was my mom at the door, her face tight with worry. The hospital was a blur of sterile rooms and whispered conversations that didn't fully register. Depression, the doctors said. A breakdown brought on by stress, guilt, and profound unhappiness. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. Heavily medicated days, sleepless nights, and the ever-present awareness of how spectacularly I'd ruined my life. No amount of therapy, pills, or concerned visits from my family could undo the damage. He didn't even come to visit me at the hospital. Not once. The hospital discharged me with a stack of prescriptions and a referral to a therapist I couldn't afford. Leaving felt more like being kicked out than being healed. I went home to his apartment, the boxes of my remaining things stacked in the corner. The moment I stepped inside, the weight of it all crashed down on me. I couldn't stay there, not one more minute. My parents took me in, their initial anger replaced by a quiet, heartbroken concern. Days turned into weeks, a dull blur of sleeping late and watching mindless TV. One morning, I forced myself to get dressed and fill out a job application at the grocery store I'd worked at in high school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Work was hard. My mind wandered, the depression lingered like a heavy fog, but the physical exhaustion was almost a relief. It meant I slept without nightmares for a few hours. My coworkers were cautiously kind, sensing there was a story behind my hollow eyes, but I didn't offer them one. Then there was Ben. He worked in produce, always cracking jokes and smiling easily. One night, after closing, he offered to walk me to my car. "This neighborhood isn't the greatest after dark," he said, "and you look like someone who could use a friend." I tried to deflect, make a joke about my resting sad face, but he saw right through it. "Look," he said gently, "I've got my own crap going on." We all do, but it doesn't mean you have to go through it alone. That simple act of kindness was the first crack in my wall of isolation. Coffee with Ben after work turned into weekend hikes, then dinners where I actually laughed for the first time in ages. He wasn't glamorous or exciting, but he was steady, patient, and refreshingly uncomplicated. One sunny afternoon, sitting on a park bench with ice cream cones, Ben turned to me. "I like you," he said, his voice quiet. "A lot." I just stared at him, unsure of what to say. He'd been so patient, waiting for me to rebuild myself at my own pace. I didn't want to hurt him, to disappoint him. But then again, maybe he was what I needed, someone real, someone good. I started slowly, choosing my words carefully. "I think I like you too." Years passed. One careful, tentative step at a time, I began to build a new life. The marriage to Ben was quiet, simple. His love wasn't flashy, but it was steady and sure, a balm to my wounded soul. We bought a modest house, adopted a dog, and settled into a comfortable routine. Happiness, I discovered, didn't always arrive with an explosion. Sometimes, it crept in quietly, like sunlight after a long storm. And then, one ordinary afternoon at the grocery store, of all places, I saw him. My ex-lover, pushing a cart down the aisle, looking rumpled and slightly worn around the edges. His wife wasn't with him, and the flicker of unease in his eyes when he saw me confirmed that their marriage was still intact. A surge of anger flared in me for a moment, at him, at the unfairness of it all. But it quickly dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of indifference. The man standing in front of me was a stranger, a ghost from a life that no longer held any power over me. "Hey," he said, his voice slightly hesitant. "How are you doing?" "Fine," I replied, my tone neutral. "I'm actually doing really well." He looked like he wanted to say more, and a small, vindictive part of me wished he would. Wished he'd beg for forgiveness, or tell me how he regretted his choices. I wanted him to know how much he'd lost. But he didn't. Just nodded, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, feeling a flicker of something that might have been pity. He was no longer the exciting escape, the thrilling secret. Just a cautionary tale, a reminder of the destruction I'd left behind. As I loaded my groceries into the car, Ben appeared beside me, a concerned look on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah." I smiled, reaching for his hand. "Just ran into an old acquaintance." "It's fine." And it was. Because in that moment, nothing about my past could dim the light of the present. I had been, my steady, good husband, and a life I'd built with my own two hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was mine. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Some days, the memories of the affair washed over me like a cold wave. I'd see a stranger with his hairstyle, hear a song that used to play constantly in my old apartment, and the guilt would come rushing back. There's a price to pay for poor choices, and the shame lived as a quiet echo within me. But then I'd look at my life. At Ben asleep next to me, the dog curled at our feet, the sunrise painting the world in soft pastels. And those echoes would fade, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. I had survived what I'd done to myself, rebuilt something from the shards of my broken life. It wasn't the same, never would be, but it was good. It was real. "You think about him much?" Ben asked one night. We were lying in bed, the darkness giving him the courage to ask the questions I knew lingered. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice soft. "Not like before, though. It's a part of who I am now. The good and the bad." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "It gets easier," he said. "Trust me." And I did trust him, with everything. He never judged me, just loved me steadily, with a patience born out of his own hurts. I'd learned so much from my mistakes. Learned that excitement fades, but true love endures. Learned forgiveness comes hardest for ourselves, not always from others. But most importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I ever thought possible. The past was still there, a shadow on the wall. But every day, as I chose Ben, chose the life we'd built together, that shadow shrank a little more. I wasn't sure if it would ever disappear completely, but I was no longer defined by it. I wasn't the same woman I was before the affair, but I'd become someone new. Someone better, someone grateful, someone ready for whatever life held next. Years blurred together. Birthday parties with cheerful chaos, quiet nights on the porch with Ben watching sunsets, backyard barbecues with friends we'd made as a couple, not just me alone. The ache of my past faded, replaced by the simple contentment of ordinary life. One afternoon, while cleaning out a dusty attic box, I stumbled upon a photo album. Old pictures of me and my ex-lover, smiling and carefree. I stared at the woman in those photos. She felt like a stranger, someone I used to be but didn't recognize anymore. With a resolute sigh, I tossed the album into the trash. It was time to let the ghosts go. "You okay up there?" Ben called from downstairs, his voice muffled. "Yeah," I shouted back, dusting my hands off, just getting rid of some junk. The junk, I realized, wasn't just the album. It was the weight I'd been carrying, the fear of not being enough, of needing excitement to feel alive. Ben had helped me see that real strength wasn't in reckless abandon, but in the quiet commitment of choosing to build a life day after day, even when it wasn't flashy or dramatic. Work was fulfilling. I'd risen through the ranks at the grocery store, now a district manager, overseeing stores across the state. There was a satisfaction in using my brain, solving problems, feeling respected for something I'd achieved. It was mine, built with my own determination. Looking in the mirror, I saw the lines around my eyes, the sprinkling of gray in my hair. But instead of panic, I felt a sense of peace. These were marks of a life well lived, mistakes made and battles overcome. I'd finally found my place in the world. It wasn't the one I'd imagined when I was younger, chasing after impossible dreams and reckless passions. But it was better, because I'd built it on truth, on second chances, and on the enduring love of a good man. I was no longer the desperate girl trapped in a stagnant marriage. I was strong. I was independent. I was happy. The moment I stepped into that bustling downtown cafe, my life took a turn I never saw coming. There he was, the epitome of charm and freedom, his canvas filled with colors I'd forgotten existed. My heart raced as he talked about art, passion, and a life without limits, everything my marriage to a dedicated yet utterly predictable accountant lacked. It wasn't long before I made the decision that would change everything. I left a note for my husband on the kitchen counter, my handwriting shaky with a cocktail of guilt and thrill. "I need to find myself," I wrote, not daring to face him and see the confusion and hurt my words would inevitably cause. I grabbed my suitcase, my heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my chest. Moving into the sleek, modern apartment in the city's heart with him felt like stepping into a new world. A world where I was not just a wife, but a muse. The excitement was palpable, a stark contrast to the life I left behind in a suburban home that now felt like a distant memory. We threw a lavish housewarming party not long after. The guests were a mix of artists, writers, and free spirits who embraced me as one of their own. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging, a feeling so intoxicating that it made me forget the life I had walked away from. Then came the letter from my husband. His words were filled with confusion, love, and a plea for me to reconsider. I remember holding the envelope, feeling its weight, and then tossing it into the trash. I was convinced I had made the right choice. "He'll move on," I told myself, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head. But as the weeks turned into months, the cracks began to show. My lover, the artist who promised me the world, started spending nights away under the guise of seeking inspiration. I was left alone in our apartment, surrounded by his art and empty promises, the silence becoming a constant reminder of my solitude. The real blow came when I stumbled upon messages on his phone from a younger woman, an aspiring model whose flirtatious texts ignited a firestorm of jealousy and doubt in me. The confrontation that followed was filled with his assurances of love, but the distant look in his eyes and his half-hearted touches spoke volumes. I had become the woman left behind, chasing after a mirage of passion and freedom that was never truly mine to begin with. As I lay awake in our bed, the reality of my situation washed over me. I had traded my old life for a dream that was slowly turning into a nightmare. The excitement and exhilaration that once drove me had faded, leaving behind a trail of regret and what-ifs. But there was no going back. The decisions I had made were mine to bear, and the path I had chosen was one I had to walk alone, no matter where it led. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us create more content you love. Thank you for your support. The moment I confronted him, everything I feared came crashing down. "You're being paranoid," he said, his gaze drifting past me as if I were just another piece of furniture in our once shared haven. His touch, once filled with passion, now felt like a courtesy, an afterthought. I wanted to scream, to shake him until he saw me again, but his indifference wrapped around me tighter than his arms ever did. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his dismissals than just mere reassurances. So, I did something I never thought I'd do, I followed him. The streets blurred as I trailed behind, my heart pounding in sync with my footsteps. And there it was, the gut-wrenching sight of him and her, hand in hand, entering a trendy downtown gallery like a scene from a movie I never wanted to star in. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted into an abyss of betrayal. I waited, time ticking away with my patience, until I couldn't bear it any longer. Confronting them at our apartment, the place that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a courtroom, and I was the one on trial. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cold, devoid of the warmth I once adored. She's something else." Just like that, our relationship, built on dreams and promises, crumbled into nothing. Wandering the streets that night felt like walking through a ghost town of my own memories. I passed the restaurant where we celebrated every anniversary, its windows fogged up with the warmth of people who still believed in love. The contrast of their joy and my despair was a bitter pill to swallow, and I found myself overwhelmed by a sense of loss so profound it felt like I was mourning the death of my own heart. It was then, amidst the neon lights and the cacophony of city life, that a desperate idea took root. "I'll win him back," I thought, a mix of determination and delusion fueling my resolve. I had to show him I'd changed, that I realized the gravity of my mistake. The next day, I stood outside our shared home, now foreign and changed with new furniture that spoke of a life moving on without me. The sense of someone else's presence lingered like a perfume, marking territory I no longer had a claim to. Through whispered conversations and reluctant informants, I learned of her, his new love. A colleague from his office, kind and understanding, the antithesis of the chaos I had brought into his life. They said she had supported him through his heartbreak, a heartbreak I had authored with my own hands. The realization stung, a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. Each revelation was a blow to my already fragile resolve. The home we shared, the man I loved, and the life I took for granted, all of it slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. But the pain, instead of deterring me, only fueled my need to make amends. I was ready to fight for him, to prove that the woman he fell in love with was still there, buried beneath her mistakes and misjudgments. Yet, standing there, on the threshold of a life that was no longer mine, I couldn't help but wonder if some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way. The journey back to him, fraught with the debris of broken trust and wounded hearts, seemed more like a fool's errand than a path to redemption. But there was no turning back now. My decision was made, for better or for worse. I started showing up everywhere I knew he'd be, my heart racing each time, half hoping he'd see me, half scared he actually would. It was like I was haunting my own life, popping up at the gym he frequented, the coffee shop where he grabbed his morning brew, even the park where he jogged on weekends. Each chance encounter, I'd put on my best casual smile, as if bumping into him was the last thing I expected. "Hey, fancy seeing you here," I'd say, my voice trembling just beneath the surface. But he never showed up alone. She was always there, glued to his side, a constant reminder of the space I used to occupy. I kept it up though, sending him gifts that had meaning only to us, letters filled with memories of our time together, hoping to spark something, anything. But it was like shouting into the void, no response, not even a text. Then, the bombshell dropped. A mutual friend, looking uncomfortable as she relayed the message, told me he was planning to propose to her. It felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. Desperation clawed at my insides, driving me to do something I never thought I'd do. One night, I found myself outside his house, the darkness cloaking my intentions. Breaking in was easier than I expected, or maybe it was just that the universe was complicit in my desperation. I left the photo album on his bed, a collection of snapshots of our life together, each picture a silent scream for him to remember, to feel something. The confrontation was inevitable. He showed up at my door, the lines of his face hard, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a cold resolve. "You have to stop," he said, his voice a knife slicing through the last threads of hope I clung to. "I've moved on. You should too." Each word was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought I could resurrect. But I couldn't accept it. In a twisted bid for revenge, I started spreading rumors about her, petty attempts to tarnish what they had. It was a low point, driven by a hurt so deep I couldn't see past it. Yet, instead of bringing him back, my actions only served to alienate me further. Friends we once shared took sides, and it wasn't mine they chose. The engagement announcement was the final blow. Not only was I not invited, but I also heard about it through the grapevine, a clear sign of how far I'd fallen from the life I once knew. The realization that I was truly on the outside looking in, with no one but myself to blame, was a bitter pill. My social circle dwindled to a handful of people, most of them more acquaintances than friends. The loneliness was suffocating, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. I had become a pariah, the architect of my own misery, as I watched from the shadows while he moved on to a happiness that once was mine. The irony of it all was a cruel joke, and the punchline was my shattered heart and a life I hardly recognized anymore. Everything started crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. At work, where I used to excel, my performance took a nosedive. My mind was elsewhere, lost in a maze of what-ifs and regrets. The day my boss called me in to discuss my new role was a polite way of saying I'd been demoted. It stung, but who could I blame? My personal life was a disaster, and now it had seeped into my professional one, too. Then there was him, my ex-lover, flaunting his new life on social media like I never existed. The day I hit unfollow felt like severing the last tie to a dream I once thought was everything. It was supposed to be liberating, but all I felt was emptiness, a gaping hole where my heart used to be. Therapy seemed like the logical next step. "You need to rebuild," my therapist said, her voice a calm in my storm. But as much as I tried to follow her advice, my mind kept drifting back to him, to us. It was like being stuck in quicksand, the more I struggled, the deeper I sank. In a bid to move on, I threw myself into the singles scene, attending events, and swiping through dating apps with a fervor. But each date ended in disappointment. My heart just wasn't in it. I was there physically, but emotionally, I was a million miles away, trapped in the past I couldn't seem to escape. The universe must have had a sense of irony because at a mutual friend's party, I ran into my husband and his fiancée. They were the picture of happiness, wrapped up in each other so completely it was as if no one else existed. Watching them, I felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting the remnants of a life that once was mine. Desperation led me to seek out closure from my lover, but even that was denied to me. "He says there's nothing left to say," his friend relayed, his words a final nail in the coffin of our affair. It was over, truly over, and I was left grappling with the pieces of my shattered illusions. I tried reconnecting with old friends, hoping to salvage some part of my former life, but the damage was done. My actions, my choices, had alienated me from the people I once considered my support system. The bridges, it seemed, were burned beyond repair. In a last-ditch effort to find some semblance of peace, I poured my heart out in a letter to my husband. It was a confession, an apology, a plea for understanding, if not forgiveness. "Please, can we meet?" I wrote, not expecting a reply, but he agreed. The coffee shop where we met was neutral territory, a place without memories. He was kind, but his kindness was a sharp reminder of all I had lost. "I wish you well," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But we can't go back." It was the closure I had sought, but not the kind I had hoped for. Sitting across from him, I realized the finality of his words. Our chapter was closed, and no amount of wishing or wanting could rewrite the story. It was time to face the future, however uncertain, and learn to live with the choices I had made. The road ahead was mine to walk alone, a path forged by lessons learned the hard way. Walking out of the coffee shop, the cold air slapped me back to reality. Across the street, I caught sight of my husband and his fiancée, lost in a moment of laughter and love. It was like watching a scene from a life I once knew, a vivid reminder of what I'd lost. The sting of it urged my feet to move faster, away from the pain, away from the past. In the days that followed, I found myself pouring my heart out into a blog. It started as a personal project, a way to offload the heavy baggage I'd been carrying. I shared my story, warts and all, under the cloak of anonymity. It was my confession, a way to make sense of the chaos I'd caused. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but they did. To my surprise, the blog gained a small following. Messages of support and understanding started trickling in, each one a tiny stitch mending the fabric of my spirit. It was bittersweet, knowing I wasn't alone in my struggles, yet wishing I'd never had to share them in the first place. Life had to go on, though, and I knew I couldn't spend it hiding behind a screen. I started seeking out new hobbies, joining community groups, anything to fill the void that had become my constant companion. It was in these moments, surrounded by strangers who knew nothing of my past, that I found pieces of myself I thought were lost. One day, on a whim, I stopped by a local animal shelter. There, amidst the chorus of barks and meows, I found a pair of eyes that seemed to look right into my soul. A scruffy little dog, with a tail that wagged despite its circumstances. I took him home that day, and for the first time in months, my apartment felt a little less empty. News of my lover's breakup with a younger woman reached me through the grapevine. It should have felt like vindication, but all it did was reopen old wounds. The cycle of pain and betrayal was a wheel that kept turning, and I was just another spoke. Rebuilding my life meant facing the people I'd hurt the most, my family. I reached out, tentatively at first, half expecting them to shut me out. But they didn't. Their acceptance was cautious, tinged with hurt, but it was there. It was the glimmer of hope I needed, a sign that maybe, just maybe, I could make amends. Encouraged by their support, I took another leap. I enrolled in night classes, picking up the threads of a dream I'd abandoned for a marriage that was no more. Each lesson, each assignment, felt like a step toward something new, a future I was building with my own two hands. As I sat in a classroom filled with hopeful faces, I realized how far I'd come. The journey wasn't easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving forward, not just running away. My past, with all its mistakes and heartaches, was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was learning, growing, and, most importantly, I was starting to forgive myself. The day my ex-husband married his fiancée was quieter than I'd expected. No dramatic breakdowns, just a silent acknowledgement that a chapter of my life had definitively closed. It was time to let go, to face forward. Selling the apartment I shared with my lover felt like shedding a skin, the final tangible link to a life that no longer fit. The papers signed and handed over, I felt lighter, somehow free. With the sale behind me, I packed up my life and moved to a new city. A fresh start, a blank canvas. The anonymity was both a blessing and a curse. Nobody knew my story, but then again, I had no one to share it with. The first few weeks were tough, adjusting to new streets, new faces, and a new rhythm of life that didn't yet feel like mine. Seeking some connection, some way to root myself in this new place, I started volunteering at a local charity. It was there, among people dedicated to making a difference, that I began to see the person I could become. Helping others brought a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before, a stark contrast to the self-centered existence I'd led. Through my volunteer work, I met someone. He was kind, with a quiet strength and a smile that reached his eyes. We started dating, building a relationship on mutual respect and shared values. For the first time, it wasn't about filling a void or escaping loneliness. It was about connection, pure and simple. But as we grew closer, I realized that while I cherish our time together, I still had so much to discover about myself. When we parted ways, it was with mutual respect and gratitude, a testament to the growth we'd both experienced. Not long after, my efforts at my new job paid off in the form of a promotion. It was a tangible sign of progress, of building something lasting on my own terms. I finally felt like I was gaining traction, moving towards a future I had a hand in shaping. Deleting my ex-husband and lover from my contacts was a small act, but symbolic. It was me, choosing to let go, to not let my past dictate my future. With each day, I found strength in the little victories, in the choices that were mine alone to make. I planned a solo trip abroad, something I dreamed of but never pursued, always waiting for the right time or the right person to go with. But there was no better time than now, no better person than myself. The night before my departure, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. The pain, the mistakes, the growth, it was all part of who I was, but it no longer defined me. As I boarded the flight, a sense of peace settled over me. The future was unwritten, a path yet to be discovered. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to find joy in the journey and acceptance in the person I'd become. My story wasn't about reclaiming the life I'd lost, but about building a new one, piece by piece, on my terms. And as the plane lifted off, leaving the city behind, I realized I was already on